You probably think of watches as, functional things, maybe elegant tools, just there to
Mhm.
tell time.
Right. Precision instruments.
Exactly. But what happens when that meticulous world, high-end watchmaking, bumps into contemporary art
Hmm.
in a really unexpected way?
That's where things get interesting.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at the Moritz Grossmann Art Edition Max Frintrop. It's a collaboration that definitely goes beyond the usual watch dial aesthetics.
It really does. It's this fascinating collision, you could say. You've got the super precise, almost rigid world of genuine horlogerie.
Okay.
And then you have the spontaneous energy of a modern artist, Max Frintrop. The sources we looked at give a pretty unique peek into how this all came together.
Yeah, and why it's catching people's eyes, not just watch collectors, but art lovers too.
Definitely both camps.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack this. Where did this collaboration even come from? It seems quite surprising.
Hmm.
We want to really understand the art part of it, what makes these watches unique in that sense, and, why is this collection getting so much buzz?
Well, the first thing that hits you looking at the sources is just how different the dials are.
Right.
Forget your standard clean look. These are described as expressive, totally unique.
And there isn't just one design, is there?
No. There are 16 individual dials, plus one extra personal piece for the artist himself. That fact alone tells you the art is really front and center here.
It really does. And maybe before we dive deeper into the art, we should establish who Moritz Grossmann is. Because that context matters, right?
Yeah.
They're called genuine haute horlogerie.
Yes, absolutely.
For listeners who maybe aren't deep into watches, what does that label, haute horlogerie, actually signal? What are we talking about?
Essentially, it's watchmaking at the absolute highest level, like the pinnacle of craft.
Okay.
The sources talk about an almost obsessive attention to detail. It's in everything they do.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, they mention crafting just one set of hands. The hour, minute, second hands for a single watch can take up to a full day's work.
A whole day for just the hands.
A whole day. So that intense dedication to doing things the traditional, super meticulous way, that's the foundation. And it makes this art collaboration maybe even more surprising.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the way it started wasn't some big marketing plan, right? It was more accidental.
Yeah, kind of a chance encounter, which is pretty cool. The story goes that the artist, Max Frintrop, was meeting a client, and this client noticed Frintrop's own watch, which happened to be a vintage Rolex GMT Master from, 1982.
Okay, just a casual observation.
Right. But it sparked a conversation, watches, art, and that somehow planted the seed for doing a project together. And eventually, Moritz Grossmann became the partner to, make it real.
They call it a full circle project in one source.
Well.
And you can sort of see why the artist's own watch sparks the idea.
Exactly. Connects directly to him working with this high-end watch brand. Pretty neat.
So let's pivot to the art then. Max Frintrop. What's his style like? What are we seeing on these dials?
Well, he is described as a rising star, known for art that's really expressive and vibrant.
Okay.
And a key thing about how he works, he paints with his canvases laid flat, horizontally on the floor.
Oh, interesting. Why is that important?
Because the core concept for this art edition, it uses the paint splatters and drops that miss the canvas and land on his studio floor. Stuff usually just, overlooked.
Wait, so the dials aren't paintings on a dial, they're made from the paint scraped off his floor.
Essentially, yes. These random-seeming bits of dried paint and ink from the floor around his canvases.
Wow, okay. That completely changes how you think about it. It's not deliberate strokes, it's the byproduct.
Exactly. And it gets even more layered because these floor fragments, they aren't just from last week. They represent about 10 years of work in his old studio.
A decade.
Roughly a decade, yeah. One source calls it a distillation of his own time. It captures how his style, his colors, everything evolved over those 10 years.
So it's like a little slice of his artistic history, literally picked up off the ground.
Precisely. There's something quite poetic about taking something that was, underfoot, maybe stepped on without a thought, and elevating it, making it the main feature of this incredibly crafted object.
Yeah.
It makes you think about what we consider valuable, maybe.
Definitely. But how on earth do you actually do that? Turning dried paint chips into a precise watch dial sounds incredibly difficult, a massive technical challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the Moritz Grossmann's skill comes in, big time.
Right.
They start by carefully choosing and cutting out bits they want from the floor material. They use something called a sonic saw.
A sonic saw, like for a medical cast.
Yeah, the source makes that comparison.
Okay.
Apparently, it's a similar tool. You have to imagine how fragile this stuff is, just dried paint,
It's
basically.
super brittle, I bet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then a specialist technician at Moritz Grossmann takes these tiny fragments and sands them down, painstakingly, down to only 0.5 millimeters thick.
Half a millimeter. That's incredibly thin. The precision needed must be insane.
Right. And then comes a really crucial step. They mention a stabilization process.
Ah, okay. To make it durable.
Yeah, exactly. It's proprietary, though. They're keeping the details under wraps. Apparently, it might even be patentable.
Makes sense.
But it's absolutely vital. Without stabilizing these delicate paint layers, they just wouldn't hold up on a watch dial you wear every day.
So it's this amazing blend of, like, raw artistic material and high-tech watchmaking engineering.
Perfectly put.
But one of the sources made a point that stuck with me.
Yeah.
That the enjoyment goes beyond the simple fact of having a nice dial. What's the deeper thing going on there?
I think it taps into that transformation idea we talked about.
Okay.
Taking something once walked on without thought and making it, a canvas, it forces you to reconsider value, right? To see beauty or history in something totally unexpected, part of the messy creative process.
So owning one isn't just owning a cool watch. It's like owning a piece of that artistic journey itself.
Exactly. A tangible piece of the process.
That's a really compelling idea.
Yeah.
The source also gets quite descriptive about seeing one of the Finnish watches, the rose gold one specifically. What did it look like up close?
Yeah, they really paint a picture. Apparently, when you look closely, each dial is just teeming with detail. A whole world of details, they say.
Like textures.
Yeah, textures, subtle shifts in the surface, how the light hits the relief, it changes constantly. And the colors on that specific one, blues and greens, made the writer think of a tropical lagoon or an undiscovered archipelago.
Wow.
Or even like visions of some exotic planet. It sounds like something you could just get lost looking into. Very evocative.
Almost like a mini abstract painting on your wrist, constantly showing you something new.
Kind of, yeah. Encourages that personal interpretation.
Now, obviously, the art is the big story here. But these are still Moritz Grossmann watches. What's ticking away underneath?
Ah, yes, the mechanics. It's powered by their in-house caliber 100.1.
Which is well regarded.
Oh, very highly. Known for beautiful finishing, precision, all the things you'd expect at this level.
And they tie the artist back in somehow.
They do. Max Frintrop's signature is actually applied to the sapphire crystal on the back of the watch, the case back. So you see the movement and you see his name right there.
Nice touch. Connects it all visually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk brass tacks. Availability, price. These sound pretty exclusive.
They are. Initially, they were released in sets of 8 watches per case material. So 8 in stainless steel, 8 in rose gold.
And the cost?
The stainless steel versions are priced at 39,500 euros.
Okay.
And the rose gold ones are 55,400 euros. Though the source did mention clients could potentially specify which case they wanted, so there might be some flexibility there.
Right. And are people buying them? Even at that price point for something so unconventional?
Apparently, yes. The article mentioned that close to half are already spoken for.
Wow. So there's real demand.
Seems like it. Clearly, this mix of high art and high watchmaking is really hitting a nerve with some collectors.
It definitely speaks to that unique appeal. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway here? What's the essence of this Moritz Grossmann art edition?
I think ultimately it shows that a watch can be more than just a watch. It's not just about telling time. Here, it's become a piece of tangible art history.
Right, a fragment of that decade of creation.
Exactly. A concentrated bit of an artist's journey captured on your wrist. It's a really different way to think about and maybe even experience time itself.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how things we see every day, maybe details we overlook, materials we discard, how they could potentially be transformed. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Thinking about how these paint fragments, once walked on, became so precious. What unseen canvases might be hiding in plain sight in your own life, or maybe in your work?
That's a great question.
Yeah, perhaps there's value or beauty waiting to be found where we least expect it.